Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel in partnership with sharpbetting.co.uk. Please click the link in the description to get your betting tips and analysis, not just for boxing, but for football, horse racing, plenty of other sports available. Please check out those guys and see what they have to say about upcoming sporting events. Thomas, good to be joined by you as always. We're here for another final prediction video. This time, former world champion Keith Thurman, an inactive Keith Thurman, against Brock Jarvis, taking place in Sydney in a couple of days' time. Thomas, good to be joined by you as always. I think this is a tough one to predict, but I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Who are you predicting for this one?
I will be going with Keith Thurman by late stoppage, about 9 or 10. I do agree with you though. I think it is a tough one. Um, because on paper, I feel like Keith Thurman obviously should be the clear favorite, just based off of resumes and experience. But it is really hard to look past the inactivity of Keith Thurman. One thing that I noticed, just looking at his record, I always like to look at the last 5 fights to get a sense of a fighter's recent form. And 5 fights ago for Keith Thurman was Sean Porter in June of 2016. So 5 fights in 9 years, which is just a crazy stat. And his last fight was 3 years ago. So it's just hard for me to imagine Keith looking sharp in there. Um, that being said, I just don't really think that we've seen enough from Brock Jarvis to suggest that he'd even be able to beat a guy like Keith Thurman. Nothing of note on his record except, he faced off against Liam Paro, but Liam Paro made short work of him as anybody could make. He got him out of there in the first round. So yeah, I don't I think perhaps he'll he'll have his moments in there and win some rounds, but I just don't see him being able to beat a guy like Keith Thurman, even though Thurman's been extremely inactive.
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one, and taken a look at the odds, and Keith Thurman is the favorite to win this fight. Brock Jarvis, I don't think many people outside of Australia know a lot about him. I think that fight against Liam Paro didn't last long at all, did it? But looking at his record, he's clearly, can clearly punch 20 stoppages in 22 wins. But he perhaps kind of when you he perhaps he hasn't beaten many people with kind of good looking records. So it's a really tough one. Keith Thurman, look, I feel like if this was a prime Keith Thurman, I don't think we'd even need to make a video because I think everyone would be going for a Keith Thurman win. However, you meant look, you pointed out kind of the stats and facts there, Thomas, of Thurman's inactivity. Um, I can't look past that, so I'm actually going for a Brock Jarvis win, and I think considering his punching power, possibly a Brock Jarvis stoppage. I just think there's a question here on can Keith Thurman just come back against a live opponent after 3 years out and win? This fight's at super welterweight. That's not a weight Keith Thurman has competed in. There's just too many questions for me to confidently say that Keith Thurman wins this fight. I just think it's a crazy fight because I didn't think Keith Thurman was going to fight again. And at the same time, like I don't know too much about Brock Jarvis, so it's a really tricky one. I feel like we sometimes touch on these videos in terms of what's next with Keith Thurman. Like I know it's a really tough one, but I would love to know kind of the story in the last 3 years of where he's been. I know there's been rumors of him fighting other guys. 36 years old, Thomas. Can you see him coming back and being active again? Like what can you realistically see happening for the rest of Keith Thurman's career?
Yeah, like you mentioned, guy's 36. I believe he turns 37 later this year. So it's just like if he does come back and you say he wins against Brock Jarvis, um, yeah, it's like what else could he do? Especially in a division like 154. It's a dangerous division. I don't see him winning a world championship, to be honest. And I think his best bet, and he's fighting Brock Jarvis in Australia, so maybe he's angling for that Tim Tszyu matchup again. Obviously that was supposed to happen a year ago, and that fell through because of injuries for Keith Thurman. But like if you ask me, I think that fight probably makes more sense now than it did a year ago, just because I don't think that Keith Thurman really deserved a title shot after all that time off in a new division. And now I think it makes a lot more sense because I think a good um, it would be a good comeback fight for Tim Tszyu after those two tough losses that he took. And a good name to have on your record. Obviously, Thurman's on the dark side of 35 and has
Yeah.
been inactive, extremely inactive, but I think it would be a good win for Tim Tszyu to have on his record, and I think it would be like one last, big shot for Keith Thurman to make a lot of money and then maybe position himself for a title shot.
Yeah, no, well, look, we shall see. I just think you see fighters take out of the ring for a year, 18 months, but 3 years, not so much. So I worry if Keith wants to be in this sport for the next 2, 3, 4 years and have 5, 6 more fights. I do worry about that. Like he could beat Brock Jarvis, but how would he get on against kind of someone like a Tim Tszyu or a Sebastian Fondora or kind of a legitimate world champion? Um, I can't see him I really can't see him beating any of those guys. If I'm honest with you, I really can't. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in Sydney, won't we? And yeah, maybe we'll speak afterwards. Thomas, good to be joined by you as always. Enjoy the fights. I'm sure it'll be a crazy time where you're based, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Likewise, thank you.